People like to say that love is patient, love is kind, but I know better, because I've seen what love really is. It's brutal, it's hungry, it's sharp enough to slice through bone and still beg for more, and when she smiled at me that night in the hospital cafeteria with blood under her fingernails and her name tag half torn, I understood immediately that love is something you bury in the same shallow grave you dig for all the other sins you're willing to commit just to keep someone warm next to you in the dark. It started the way all tragedies do. Quiet, small, a detail you overlook because the heart wants the lie more than it wants the truth, and when she touched my wrist to ask if I had any spare gauze, I felt something pass between us, something electric and red and awful, like a defibrillator wire dipped in pig's blood, something that screamed, "This is it, this is the one," and I knew I'd give her anything, anything she asked for, because her eyes were the color of the kind of night you don't wake up from. She was a nurse. Real name Colleen, but she hated that, said it made her sound like a Sunday school teacher, so I started calling her Lenny, and Lenny laughed the way addicts laugh when they think they've found a new drug. And maybe she had, maybe I was the needle and she was the vein, or maybe we were both the rot feeding on something soft beneath our skin, because the first night we kissed she tasted like vodka and iron, and I didn't care that her locker reeked of bleach and something more sour, something like decay, because she whispered things into my mouth like, "Do you want to see what I've done?" and "It's only wrong if you get caught." I should have known what she meant. I really should have known. Because love, when it rots, doesn't just go quietly, it screams, it writhes, it festers until it claws its way into your dreams and makes you watch. She showed me her first. A man in a bed with his face gone purple, oxygen tube still hissing into nostrils that no longer drew breath, and she said it was an accident, a miscalculation, too much potassium in the drip, and maybe it was, but she licked the blood from her fingers like she was praying over it, and when she turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "He was hurting, he begged me," I nodded, because if you love someone, really love them, you don't argue with their grief. You validate it, you hold it up like a sacred object, you make it holy with your silence. We became a team, the way fire and gasoline make a team, and I swear to you, every time I did it, for her, only for her, it got easier. There was the man who called her a whore in the ER, said he wanted a male nurse instead. Lenny told me about it that night over burgers, and I watched her lip tremble as she said, "He looked at me like I was filth, and that was enough, that was all it took." 3 days later he was found in the staff parking lot with a broken 4-stand shoved down his throat so deep it pierced his spine, and I stayed with him. I held his hand while he choked, whispered to him that it was okay, that help was coming, that it would all be over soon, and when the lights left his eyes, I didn't even blink. I did it for her. Every drop of blood, every ragged breath, every final shudder, I did it for Lenny. I think the thing people never understand is that love needs a sacrifice, that it demands one, and if you don't offer it, if you don't feed it something raw and human and screaming, it will take it from you anyway. I chose to give it what it wanted. And still, Lenny kept crying in her sleep. She couldn't sleep anymore, not without the pills, not without her body folding into mine like a prayer someone forgot to finish, not without the ceiling fan whispering that name she wouldn't speak aloud. The one she said died the day she took her first oath as a nurse, the one she swore she didn't mean to kill but kept dreaming about anyway, the man with the stubbled chin and the nicotine-stained fingers who, according to her, used to press a Bible into her stomach when she wouldn't stop crying. I asked if he was her father. She said he was worse. The dreams got bad around February, when the nights felt like they were stitched together out of frost and glass, and I'd wake up to find her pacing the kitchen, slicing apples she never ate into paper-thin spirals, red skin curling down her wrists like blood, the knife always clean but her knuckles raw from how hard she gripped the handle, and I'd ask, "Who was it this time?" and she'd whisper back, "Nobody you'd miss." And that was all the explanation I needed. Because when you love someone, you don't need the reasons, you just need the opportunity. That opportunity came again on a Wednesday shift, an old woman, screaming in room 408, spitting curses in Polish or maybe Latin, I couldn't tell, but Lenny said she kept trying to claw at the nurses, told everyone there were devils in the ceiling tiles, said Lenny's shadow was dripping something, and I knew what that meant. I saw the look in Lenny's eyes. That deep, dark heat that said, she had decided. I followed her after the code was called, slipped in before the others could arrive, and there she was, Lenny, kneeling beside the bed with a pillow pressed against the woman's face, not with rage but with a strange kind of mercy, like a mother snuffing out a child's nightmare, and I stood in the doorway and watched the feet jerk beneath the blanket, the oxygen tube bouncing like a puppet string, until finally the bed fell still and the beeping stopped. She didn't speak to me that night. She just crawled into bed, took my hand, and whispered, "I don't think she sees me anymore," and I didn't know if she meant the old woman or something else entirely, maybe her reflection, maybe her soul, if such a thing had ever survived the things we'd done. But the next day, she slept. For the first time in weeks, she slept, full and heavy and deep, her breath soft and slow, and I watched her like you watch the rain after a long drought, like something sacred had returned, and I told myself, this is what it's for, this is what it's all for, and if the cost of her peace was another name on a death certificate, then I'd buy it gladly. Over and over. Again and again. I started keeping a list, not for guilt, not for repentance, just so I could look at it and remember. Each name was a gift, a tithe, an offering on the altar of our love. There were 7 by then. 7 people whose lives I had helped end, each one folded neatly into the rhythm of my devotion, and the thing is, it never felt cruel, not really. There was no rage in it, no madness, just a kind of logic, the same kind you use when pulling weeds from a garden. If it hurts the thing you love, it has to go. But then came Victor. Victor, who wore his stethoscope like a noose around his neck, who made jokes that made Lenny flinch, who touched her shoulder a little too long when he thought no one was looking, and I saw it, that old pain, that flicker of fire in her jaw, and I knew. I knew she was going to ask me. And she did. Only this time, it wasn't like the others. This time, she said, "I want to watch." There was something different in her voice when she asked me to kill Victor. Something colder, flatter, like a scalpel left soaking too long in disinfectant, the edges no longer sterile but soaked with something intimate, personal, something rotting, and I realized, even before I said yes, that this wasn't just about him, not really, that this was about her, about some jagged little hunger inside her that had grown too large to ignore. And if I had ever believed we were doing this for peace or justice or protection, that belief died the moment she said, "I want to see it when it happens." She said it like a test. Like she needed to know whether watching a man die, really die, would finally let her sleep forever. Victor was the kind of man who left his keys in his scrub pocket, who walked to the staff lot with his eyes on his phone and his head full of numbers, who laughed with his mouth open and his hands always too close to some nurse's waist, and when I found him that night, behind the dumpsters where the cameras didn't reach, where the surgical waste steamed in the cold, I smiled and said I needed help lifting a broken gurney, and like the idiot he was, he followed me. Lenny was already there, standing in the shadows between a rusted disposal bin and the reeking maw of the incinerator chute, dressed in her softest sweater, the pink one I bought her last Valentine's Day, and her face was so calm it terrified me. Eyes empty, mouth unreadable, like a porcelain mask worn for a funeral. Victor turned when he saw her. "Lenny?" he asked, and there was a flicker of confusion, then a hint of something sour, fear, maybe, or desire, and I saw her jaw clench like she was biting a bullet, and she didn't speak, not a word, just nodded once toward me. That was my signal. I didn't hesitate. The scalpel went in below his ear, up and hard. And I could feel the cartilage snap, feel the twitch of his spine as he dropped, breath caught in his throat like a broken whistle, and I kept going, slicing through his neck, blood spraying against the bricks in hot arcs, and Lenny, sweet, silent Lenny, stepped forward, into the spray, her cheeks dotted with red, her hands trembling just slightly as she watched the man who once made her cry struggle to scream with a windpipe full of blood. He didn't last long. They never do when the love is strong enough. When it was done, I stepped back, panting, and looked at her, waiting for some sign, horror, joy, satisfaction, but what I saw wasn't any of those things. What I saw was longing. I thought it would help, she whispered, staring down at Victor's body like she expected it to twitch again, like maybe he owed her one last convulsion, and I stepped forward and touched her cheek, brushed a clot of blood from her eyebrow, and said, "You did so good, sweetheart. You stayed the whole time." She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, leaving little red footprints behind her. That night, she didn't sleep. Not even an hour. She just lay there, twitching, murmuring something under her breath, words I couldn't understand, and when I asked what was wrong, she looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "He didn't beg." I didn't know what to say. What do you say to the woman you love when she tells you the death you gave her wasn't enough? We buried Victor in pieces, because that was easier to carry, easier to forget. But the memory didn't fade, not for her, and for days afterward, she walked the hallways like a ghost, staring into the rooms of the dying as though searching for something she'd lost, some flicker of meaning or closure that kept slipping through her blood-slick fingers. And then came the whisper. The one I caught her speaking to in the mirror. A name I didn't recognize. A name she said was hers before I made her forget. She started spending more time in the bathroom with the lights off, sitting on the floor with her back against the tub, whispering things I couldn't hear, things I wasn't sure were meant for me, or anyone living, and sometimes I'd find her with her palms pressed flat to the mirror, forehead touching the glass, eyes wide open and unblinking, and once, just once, she said, "Tell him I'm not Lenny anymore. Tell him I gave her up to be clean." But there was no one there. Just me. And the reflection that didn't match what she looked like anymore. Her smile had gone crooked, like it didn't belong to her mouth, and her voice had started breaking in strange places, sometimes high and soft like the girl I fell in love with, sometimes low and gravelly like someone who'd been screaming for years in a locked room. And there were moments when I'd catch her writing things in the margins of her medical textbooks, words that didn't make sense, diagrams of hearts with little knives stuck through them, each one labeled mine, 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 mine in looping, childish script. I still loved her, of course I did, but there was something in her now, something with splinters for fingers and too many teeth. And I started to realize that maybe all these people we were killing, all these offerings of blood and flesh, maybe they weren't soothing the thing inside her. Maybe they were feeding it. Maybe I was too. I tried to stop. Tried to bring up the idea of therapy, or prayer, or maybe just leaving, taking the car and driving until we ran out of road, finding some little cottage on a hill where nobody knew our names, where we could live like ghosts and never touch another body again. But she just looked at me, head tilted, and said, "Would you leave me if I asked for one more?" I said no. Of course I said no. Because what else do you say when someone you love looks at you like she's already decided you're the knife? The next one wasn't someone she hated. It was someone I did. Dr. Halloran. My old professor. My once mentor. The man who laughed when I botched my first autopsy and told the whole room I cut like a drunk toddler playing Operation, the man who got promotions off other people's collapses, the man who told me, once, in a haze of gin breath, that I wasn't made for medicine, that I'd be better off, cleaning up after the ones who mattered. He was retired now. Fat, soft, slower than he used to be. And when I told her about him, she didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just reached for my hand and whispered, "Then let's bleed him." That was the first time she ever said it out loud. Bleed. Not kill. Not stop. Not help. But bleed. I should have known then. I should have run. We did it in his kitchen, early on a Sunday, sunlight slanting through the blinds like prison bars across his face, the knife warm in my hand, his body surprisingly tough despite the years of decline, and she watched, barefoot and expressionless, as I dragged the blade across his chest and opened him up like an overripe fruit, and I swear on every name I buried before him, she smiled when the blood hit her feet. Not a soft smile. Not a grateful one. But a hungry one. And afterward, she didn't shower. She didn't cry. She didn't whisper anything to the mirror. She just sat in our bed, naked, still dripping red, and said, I remember now. His name is Marrow. And he lives in me like a crown. I asked what she meant. She laughed. And the sound didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to something that had been crawling through her bones since the first time she touched death. I don't know how long it's been since she stopped sleeping, really sleeping, but the space between dusk and dawn has turned into something else entirely, an endless, twitching silence broken only by the creak of her pacing, the low scratch of her nails against the bedroom walls, or the sound of her whispering words into the darkness that have no business being spoken by anyone with a soul still trapped inside their ribs. And I've begun to notice that when she speaks, when she really talks, it's not just her voice anymore. There's someone else in there. It started the night I woke up to find her standing over me, her face inches from mine, her eyes milky and wrong, her mouth twitching with half-formed syllables as she said, "He's not watching anymore. He's inside. He likes your hands." And then she kissed me. But it wasn't a kiss, not really, not a lover's kiss, not a woman's kiss. But something cold and hungry, like the kiss of a needle before it pierces, like the mouth of a thing that's never been human but is trying so hard to pretend, and I tasted blood on her lips that didn't come from me. That morning, she cut off all her hair in the sink with trauma shears. She said it made her feel lighter, but when I swept up the curls, I found something tangled in the strands, a tooth, small and yellow, old, too old to belong to either of us. And when I asked her where it came from, she just giggled and said, "He sheds sometimes, but only when I'm good." I used to think I loved her more than anything. Now I think I love the memory of her, the fading echo of the woman who once cried into my chest after her first patient died, who once held my hand so tightly I thought the bones would break just because she couldn't bear to be alone during a thunderstorm. Now I look at her, and I see something else. Something that has cracked her open from the inside and is wearing her like a dress. And I hate myself because I still want her. Still want to please her, to offer her things, people, anything that might make her eyes go wide again, that might make her moan like she used to when we were still human, when blood was something sacred instead of currency, when death was a tragedy instead of a fucking aphrodisiac. She told me about Marrow last night. Not just a name. Not just a whisper. But a history. She said he's old, older than memory, older than God, older than whatever myth made us believe we were safe in our own skin, and that he was once a king of bones, a high priest of hollowness, buried alive in a temple beneath the roots of things that still remember screaming, and she said that when she was 6, and her uncle locked her in the shed behind the house, she started hearing him in the rot, in the creak of the wood, in the maggots crawling through the grain. She said he offered her comfort. She said he taught her that love means never leaving, even after the body stops. Even after the screaming stops. Even after the bones fall silent. I didn't believe her. Not really. Not until I saw what she drew on the wall above our bed. It wasn't a picture. It was a map, made in blood, in hair, in tiny bones I didn't know were missing from my own body until I touched my ribs and felt the gap. And in the center of it, scrawled in something dark that looked like old ash, was the word, offering. And I swear to whatever dying God still listens in this world of meat and misery, I swear I heard something breathing behind it. Something too large for the room. Something wearing her laughter like a second skin. And last night, when I kissed her stomach, soft, blood-warm, and trembling, I heard it speak through her. "One more," it said. "Bring me one more and I'll let her wear her face again. Bring me one more and you can touch her without screaming. I brought her a child. Don't judge me. Don't you dare judge me, not until you've loved someone so deeply that the shape of your own soul starts to bend around them like wet metal, not until you've looked at their hollowed-out eyes and promised the dark you'd feed it, not until you've seen them tremble in bed, whispering names not meant for the living, clawing at the skin of their own stomach like there was something in there trying to get out." She was waiting by the window when I came back. Naked. Still. Covered in writing I hadn't put there. Marks like coiled snakes drawn with fingers dipped in ink made from old memories and marrow and filth, sigils that moved when I wasn't watching, that hissed when I blinked, and in her hand she held a blade I didn't recognize, something too old for this world, something that pulsed like it wanted to be used. The girl was small. Maybe 11. She never screamed. That was the worst part, I think. I remember thinking, in the hour before, when I was watching her eat ice cream on the bench, when I was imagining the way the blood would look against white tile, that she would scream, because they all scream, eventually, they all understand what's happening. But she didn't, not once, not even when I tied her down. She just looked at me with those two big eyes, like she knew. Like she'd been chosen. Lenny, no, whatever wore her name now, took the knife. She kissed the girl's forehead. And she said, "This is the last one." She always said that. And then she opened her up. From sternum to pelvis. Slow. Precise. Like a surgeon. Like a lover. Like someone unwrapping the last gift of a long, cold winter. The girl's blood was warm. It splashed across Lenny's chest like it belonged there, and she laughed, this wet, broken, ecstatic sound that made the walls tremble. And when she reached in and took the heart out still twitching, she held it to her own lips and whispered, "Take me. I'm yours. I'm ready." Then she bit into it. And that was when the room changed. The walls went soft. The ceiling turned to meat. The window showed nothing. Just black, just something like breath, wet and endless, pressing on the other side of the glass. And something came in. It didn't walk. It didn't crawl. It just was. Something with too many limbs and no face, something that stank of old earth and hospitals and open graves, something that opened its arms and she walked right into them like she'd always belonged there. I stood in the blood. I watched her smile. And I realized she was never mine to begin with. She belonged to it. To him. To the thing that lives between heartbeat and death rattle. To marrow. And now. Now I sit here, in this house that no longer has walls, in this silence that breathes like it's alive, and I wait for the next name to come. Because I am his, too. Because I brought her the girl. Because I opened the door. Because love doesn't end in peace or comfort or truth. Love ends in teeth. Warning, 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 if you've read this far and felt a flicker of understanding, if some part of your chest ached not from fear but from familiarity, then I urge you, turn back now. Don't go looking for the markings. Don't trace the name in your notebook. Don't whisper marrow when the house creaks at 3 a.m. Because he listens. Because he recruits. And because once you love someone enough to kill for them, it's already too late to stop bleeding.